the award recipients for this year's dinner. Thank you all for the great work that you are doing. Thank you, South Dakota, for fighting for what's right, and I look forward to seeing you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage national leader Joe Sanberg, progressive entrepreneur and founder of the Working Hero PAC.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Please close your eyes. I'd like you to think back to a time in your life where perhaps there were some bills you couldn't pay, or a time where maybe you woke up in the middle of the night wondering how you're going to pay that month's rent, or whether you'd be able to provide the medical care that your kid or your parent needed. And I want you to keep your eyes closed and feel the tension you felt in your back and the paralyzing pit in your stomach during those moments. I want you to really feel that anxiety. Please open your eyes. That feeling is how nearly 8 out of 10 Americans live every single day. Because nearly 8 out of 10 Americans live paycheck to paycheck, knowing that when life happens, when something goes wrong, they won't be able to handle it. Now, I grew up near Disneyland in California. And Disneyland is known as the happiest place on earth. But the happiest place on earth casts a dark shadow on the communities that surround it, including the home in which I grew up. My mom raised me by herself, and she worked as hard as a mom could work. And even though she worked as hard as someone could work, we ultimately lost our home to foreclosure. And I think how you grew up always stays with you. And those early experiences really pierced this idea that you're taught in school that if you work hard and play by the rules, everything will work out okay. Because my mom couldn't have worked any harder, and things didn't work out okay. And for those nearly 8 out of 10 Americans who are living paycheck to paycheck, so too is their American covenant broken. Now, after I graduated high school, I went to this fancy school on the East Coast called Harvard, and it was a really weird experience being there from a working class background. You know, where I was growing up, there were families that maybe went to the beach on weekends. Yet at Harvard, there were these families and kids whose great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents were really rich. And it felt like you just didn't belong. I started my career in the financial industry because I wanted to support my mom. I had been actually an activist in college. I worked on Justice for Janitors. I was College Democrats president. I know we have some College Democrats here tonight. And when I graduated, though, I really wanted to provide financial security for my mom. So I started my career on Wall Street, and again, it was such a weird experience having come from a working class background. I saw people that judged others by how much money they had, not by who they were and how they treated others. I saw an industry that we all saw from some degree of distance that totally divorced itself from the consequences of its actions, that was all about profit without any consideration of the value that that profit was or wasn't creating. And you know, in my 20s, I kind of got disconnected from my core values. I'm almost 40. And when I was 29, my brother took me out for lunch when I was visiting him and my mom. And he said to me that my 18-year-old self wouldn't like my 29-year-old self. That really shook me because I really liked who I was when I was 18. And that sparked me to leave behind that early part of my career on Wall Street and move back to California to try and build businesses that fix things instead of break them. I was the founding investor of Bladeburn, and more recently, I co-founded an online financial institution called Aspiration.com. And the idea of Aspiration is that currently most people hate their bank because you have a relationship with your bank where the worse you do, the better your bank does, right? The lower your balances, the more fees your bank charges you. And so the revolutionary idea of aspiration is that customers should only pay aspiration if they're so happy they'll voluntarily pay. So we have this progressive business model literally called pay what's fair, where the only fees you pay are voluntary. To try and flip the script around the relationship those people have with their bank and prove that you can do business in a progressive way, right? Progressive and business are rarely married, and if we really want to create the change that our country needs, It has to come through government, politics, activism, and through progressive entrepreneurship. And in parallel to that, I realized that there were so many people like my family when we were growing up that we wouldn't be able to serve at Aspiration. So I started a big nonprofit that my friend J.D. Schulten runs in Iowa called Working Hero. And the mission of Working Hero is to reach all the people around the country who are eligible for this thing called the Earned Income Tax Credit. Has everyone heard of the Earned Income Tax Credit? Yep. Yeah. So the dark secret of the Earned Income Tax Credit is that every single year in the country, there are $15 billion of earned income tax credits that low-income people don't claim because they don't know about it. They earn a low income, don't file a tax return, and they miss out on thousands of dollars of cash back. That could be the difference between whether they're providing 2 meals a day for their kids and 3. So what Working Hero has done over the last 4 years is every year now serving over 2 million low-income Americans and helping them get over $5 billion of earned income tax credits that they wouldn't normally get. And we've done it in California, and Iowa, and South Carolina, and soon Ohio. And what I want to challenge you here is that if you create an EITC in South Dakota, Working Hero will come and help you implement it. However long it may take, whether it's next year or in 10 years, when South Carolina creates a state earned income tax credit, Working Hero will come and make sure that we provide the free tax prep to low-income South Dakotans so they get it. Now, there were a few more minutes of prepared remarks that I had written. But as I was going over those prepared remarks this afternoon, I was watching MSNBC, and another crime of hate flashed across the TV screen. And so I'm scrapping the rest of my speech, and I'm going to spend the next 2 or 3 minutes talking about what happened today in California and what's happening in our country. It's easier to talk about happier things, but if we don't talk about what's going on, which is a coordinated, vicious campaign of hate in the vessel of white supremacists against so many Americans, if we don't keep talking about it, we're never going to fix it. So today, again, in my home state of California, there was yet another attack on people while they were worshiping, this time at a synagogue in Poway. And the current reports are one person is dead, 3 injured. 6 months to the day from the worst anti-Semitic attack in the history of our country at Tree of Life. 6 months ago today, Tree of Life happened. I'm Jewish. Jews and Muslims in this country worship every day with the murmur of fear, knowing that there are white supremacists who want to kill us. This is the most dangerous time, arguably, in American history to be a Jew or a Muslim. And it's because we have a president who incites hate and violence from the biggest bully pulpit in our country.
Yes, that's right.
And I almost scrapped the whole speech, but I wanted to start by talking about the paycheck-to-paycheck Americans, that almost 8 out of 10 Americans, because they are victims in the coordinated attacks of white supremacists too. You see, the hate and violence that our president incites is directed against everyone except the most wealthy, most powerful, and most connected white men in a small portion of this country. And until we say it, we're not going to fix it. They want us to become numb to what is happening in our country. And with respect, we, even as Democrats, have become numb. On the day of this, yet again, terrible anti-Semitic attack, it took almost until the end of the evening for it to be mentioned. And please take that in the spirit of partnership and fidelity, but I think it testifies to the fact that even those of us in this room who have to be the allies of those who live on the margins are becoming numb. And it's the 8 out of 10 Americans who live paycheck to paycheck that are getting messed over by tax reform. We can't become numb to them. It's the Jews and Muslims who worship with the fear of knowing white supremacists want to kill them. We can't become numb to that terror. It's all the people who drive every single day while being black, knowing that just because they're black, they can get pulled over by the police. We can't become numb to that. It's all the Latinos who every single day know that an ICE agent could pull them over, go to their home, accuse them of not being a citizen, whether or not they are. That their kids are coming home from school crying because their friends have said they're going to be deported. That we have these gangs on the south of the border stopping people seeking asylum. We can't become numb to any of that. An attack on any of these people, whether Jew, Muslim, Black, Latino, LGBTQIA, working class, is an attack on all of us.
Native American.
You know, in closing, it's so chilling that this attack in San Diego and Poway occurred on the last day of Passover. Now, I'm a liberal Jew, and what Passover means to me is a celebration of the fact that we were all once slaves in a foreign land. For Jews, we were slaves 3,300 years ago. For African Americans, slaves just 153 years ago. And the reality is, across the world, tens of millions of people still live in slavery. And the fact that this white supremacist killed more people and incited more hate on the last day of Passover requires us to harness every ounce of will and audacity to say no more. We will not stop calling this out, no matter how uncomfortable, no matter how unhappy, no matter how unpleasant, and we have to do it in every part of the country, in South Dakota, in California and New York, and everywhere in between. I want to quote two of the most important philosophers in our history in closing. First, I want to quote Dr. Martin Luther King's speech, Unfulfilled Dreams, from March 3rd, 1968. In Unfulfilled Dreams, Dr. King said, one of the great agonies of life is we are constantly trying to finish that which is unfinishable. We are commanded to do that. Now, I know the task of creating a country free of bigotry, hatred, prejudice, misogyny, racism, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia might seem like an unfinishable task. And in fact, in the last couple of decades, we've stopped trying, which is why the white supremacists have risen. We have stopped trying. So in closing, I ask you to remember what Dr. King said. We have to constantly try to finish that which is unfinishable. And from Dr. King to Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss said, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to change. It's not. Unless every South Dakotan in this room cares a whole awful lot about the 8 out of 10 Americans who live paycheck to paycheck, but are under assault by a monopoly economy, unless everyone in this room cares a whole awful lot about Jews and Muslims who worship in fear of being killed, unless everyone in this room cares a whole awful lot about Black Americans who drive knowing that they can be pulled over for the color of their skin, unless everyone in this room cares a whole awful lot about the 1 out of 5 Americans who are Latino and live in fear of the American version of the Gestapo, which is ICE, unless everyone in this room cares a whole awful lot about the attack on women's dominion over their bodies, unless everyone in this room cares a whole awful lot about our friends in the LGBTQIA community, nothing is going to change. It's not. And so, in closing, I ask you, if you are going to care a whole awful lot, stand up. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to change. It's not. We are counting on you to care a whole awful lot, from California to New York and everywhere in between. It has to occur in South Dakota. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, and now a message from presidential candidate Amy Klobuchar.